الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Dear brothers and sisters, dear friends, dear viewers, those who are going to watch us live and those who are going to see this later, thank you for joining us for this conversation with Professor Peter Slezak. Um, we are facing a very real challenge to peace that could engulf the entire Middle East and possibly spread beyond. And Israel, as it would seem, not satisfied with the killings of Palestinians, has now started a war against Iran and is doing its best to bring the Americans and other allies into this war and to discuss the ramifications and the implications of all this. I'm very grateful to Professor Peter Slezak for giving me the time. Professor, thank you very much and welcome. And let's hope that whatever contribution we can make today in this conversation, that we can get some more support for peace and maybe people who can work with us to spread the conversation and recruit more and more people towards the cause of peace and maybe put pressure on governments and lobbyists to also work with us for peace.
Thanks. It's my pleasure to join you, Keysar. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you. It's my privilege.
Now, we've all seen over the last 20 months what Israel is willing to do to take over more of the Palestinian territories. What it's done in Gaza, it's almost leveled the whole Gaza Strip. Why attack Iran now, 20 months into the conflict or into the bombardment of Gaza and the taking over of the West Bank or having a more military presence in the West Bank recently? Is it to divert attention from what's happening in Palestine, or is there more sinister, more global motives? What do you think?
Look, the only obvious thing I can say about that is that, firstly, online you can see Netanyahu has been aiming for this for years. For quite a long time now, people have put on clips where every time he's asked about Iran, he says it's like within a year, within 6 months, within weeks of a bomb. And he's been saying this for 20 years. It's always like, next year for 20 years. So that was a cynical attempt to already whip up hysterical fear of Iran. And the leading authoritative figures have said there was no grounds for that. I mean, it was Iran that had signed the agreement, the JCPOA agreement, and they have allowed inspectors. And so the idea that Iran was on the threshold of sending a nuclear bomb to Israel is nonsense. And so, but also, if you ask why now, because clearly Netanyahu has been waiting for a long time explicitly for an excuse to bomb. And of course, it was unprovoked on this occasion as well. In fact, I think there was about to be on the day or so before some discussion with the United States President Trump, and they preempted that by attacking Iran and making lame and inappropriate excuses that this was self-defense. It wasn't self-defense at all. And so that's on that score as to why they wanted to attack Iran. They've always been wanting to attack Iran. And the argument that they are supporting the Houthis and supporting Gaza and Hezbollah is probably true. But then the United States is supporting Israel to a very large extent. So that's not exactly a reason to bomb Iran. And as for whether it's a distraction, it certainly is serving to distract attention from Gaza, which is getting worse and worse by the day. And of course, Gaza is so horrible, but it's also been distracting attention from the West Bank, which is they're running riot in the West Bank. It's just crazy. They're killing people, digging up the roads in Jenin and elsewhere. I mean, it's a rogue state that's gone completely crazy. And of course, the main reason is that he can even try now to and go ahead and attack Iran is what he's been shown is that the United States and the world hasn't reacted to the horror in Gaza. They've acted with complete impunity. Nobody, none of the major powers, and least of all our own government here in Australia, have done anything at all significant to prevent this. These are all violations of international law, and the complete impunity gave clearly the green light to Netanyahu to think he can get away with this. So this was a good time for him to do what's been a long-standing plan to bring Iran to its knees, which is probably not possible, but certainly can cause a lot of damage. And the fear, inevitably, Iran has been, I think, quite restrained so far. I mean, after all, it's Israel that has nuclear weapons and not Iran. And people are making this point online, although the mainstream are not necessarily saying this, but some important commentators that you can see online, experts, are pointing out that, I mean, for example, Mehdi Hassan, who's a very good commentator, he's been pushing back against Piers Morgan and people like this that are these warmongers, to saying that, well, Iran has behaved itself, although recently, has been perhaps less cooperative, but that's because, after all, it was America that pulled out of the nuclear non-proliferation agreement that had. So, the idea that Iran is the great threat to the world is really a mistake, and it's Israel that's the big threat.
Well, that's becoming increasingly apparent to more and more people. But as we see this, what we need is, I suppose, the motivation to do something about it. It's interesting that only a week or so ago that President Trump was saying that he was praising Iran for coming to the table and talk about the nuclear program, and then a week later, everything.
And that's why, almost certainly, that's why Netanyahu decided he better do something. He clearly didn't want the United States and Iran to come to any arrangements. He wanted to preempt that. It was clear that that's why he made this attack just at the moment when Trump was about to talk to Iran. That's very revealing.
Well, what is also, I suppose, a lot of people would be wondering, and probably a lot of Americans as well, that a few days ago Trump was was praising them, and all of a sudden now he's being led by Netanyahu. Now, I know Trump appears to have a huge ego, but where has it gone in this situation? Now he's changed his rhetoric completely.
Look, it's pretty clear. Trump is very unpredictable and unreliable. I mean, in a way, that's an advantage because sometimes he's doing things that Biden would have never done. I mean, he wanted to talk to Iran. He wants to, talk to North Korea. He does things which are, or to Russia. In some ways, his unpredictability means that maybe there's a breakthrough in some ways that we wouldn't have got before. But he is unpredictable, and he certainly, I mean, perhaps not even as much as Biden had been, but he's indicated, for example, he wanted to end these wars, like in Ukraine and so on. Biden never talked that way. But you're right. I mean, it's hard to know what to make of Trump and his actions, where he changes his mind every day.
And that makes life more difficult for people in the entire Middle East and Gulf region. What was interesting in this also is that the more recent statements coming from Arab countries such as Saudi Arabia and others, that they have come forth and clearly articulated their support for Iran, and bearing in mind that the Saudis are Sunni Muslims, they're seen as conservatives, Sunni Muslims, and Iran is Shiite. They've put aside that difference, and commendably so. They are to be commended for putting aside that difference, as we see people of many different religious persuasions, especially Jews, coming forward to condemn what Netanyahu and his government have been doing in Gaza. That it's about time that Muslims also put aside our differences to save lives. And if Netanyahu has succeeded in anything in the last couple of years, it is to unite Muslims where in the past he'd been trying to divide us.
But look, forgive me for being a little bit critical, but it's a bit late for the poor people in Gaza. I mean, the Arab countries, as far as I can tell, I may be not well informed, but they've done nothing. And that's terribly sad that Gaza has been destroyed. And where are they? I mean, I think they're all in cahoots with Israel. I mean, in the long run, Saudi Arabia, as far as I understand, and even Jordan and others, they've been cozy with Israel, and they've stood by and allowed Gaza to be destroyed for a genocide to happen. I don't really understand how that could happen, but it's very sad.
Look, I think they're all impacted by the very same powerful lobbies that are pressuring our own government in Australia and many Western governments. And from what I understand is that not only those lobbies, but have infiltrated those countries to a large extent. But there's also an imminent threat hanging over their head. That in some cases. It is believed that the Americans, along with Israel, are propping up those regimes, and for one reason only, and that reason is to protect Israel and keep it as one of America's military bases in the region. Imagine, well, I mean, you don't have to imagine, it's a reality that a country where there's compulsory military service, a huge number of reservists per capita, and they can not only inside Israel but also in the diaspora, and they rush to Israel, carry arms, and they go and kill people, and it's like you wouldn't see that to this same level with any other country or in any other situation.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I mean, the other regimes, as I understand it, the Arab countries, their their population would be supportive of Gaza and the Palestinians. It's their leadership that is in cahoots. That's very sad and probably very unstable. I mean, you wonder how far they can go to permit what they're doing before there's some kind of serious consequences internally. But I don't have a deep understanding of the internal politics of these different countries.
Oh, look, unfortunately, in those countries, and I say unfortunately, in some of those countries, the intelligence apparatus is very, very, very strong. It's very large. And of course, it's supported by the Americans and Israelis and some other European powers. And they won't even let activists call for a protest without having them arrested and thrown in prison. It's very rare
That's
to get a protest going.
That's even true in Europe. In Germany, if you hold a Palestinian flag, the police will come and arrest you. So this is a worldwide problem, not just in the Arab countries.
Um, well, I think Netanyahu would probably be biting his nails now, worried how he's going to get the other Muslim nations to stop making the statements and not support Iran. What we've seen since this last attack is Iran's capacity to bring down F-35 stealth fighters. Now, I haven't seen that before, and that indicates that the technology that Israel is up against is far beyond what it expected, and just not sure how the Israeli public and perhaps the Americans are taking that downing of the F-35 fighters and Iran's current capacity to retaliate.
I'm not an expert on the military situation, so I don't quite know what Iran's military capacity is, but judging what some other commentators have said, um, the academic at Tehran University, Marandi, who's been on air quite a bit, he's saying that Iran has very significant military capacity. Israel must know all that. That's why I think they targeted a lot of the capacity to respond in advance. They're not stupid. So I don't understand the likely military confrontation and how that could go, but one would hope we can avoid that before we find out.
Well, it's already started. There's been retaliation, extensive property damage in Israel, and loss of life as well.
Yeah.
Um, uh, how will that impact the Israeli public? I'm just not. I mean, there was already a growing opposition to the Netanyahu government,
Yeah.
but also the extremists have a lot of support, and they continue to have a lot of support. So,
Also, it's worth saying, though, the opposition to the Netanyahu government, as far as Gaza goes, wasn't about Gaza. It was about their own internal, problems, and sadly the enthusiasm for what Israel was doing in Gaza is almost universal in Israel. That's a very shocking fact about the racism, the genocidal attitudes of most Israelis. And I have to say, sadly, I'm sorry to say the supporters here in this country, the Jewish community and others, organizations especially, are vocal in their uncritical support for what Israel is doing. This is a very unfortunate situation that we have to deal with.
Although there are some Jewish organizations and Jewish groups and individuals, distinguished, esteemed individuals such as yourself, who are speaking out against it. And you have not missed a Palestinian protest. You've been a member of the APAN board in the past. I mean, surely that is extremely encouraging for all of us.
You're right about that to one extent. I had some years ago begun a kind of a Jewish, it was called the Independent Australian Jewish Voices, which was expressing dissent. We had a lot of signatures of significant people. That was quite a few years ago. Now, you're right to the extent that I was just at a meeting, the Jewish Council of Australia is a young group we had a very big meeting here in Sydney. I mean, several hundred people turned up. They're very significantly visible online, saying all sorts of very strong things regularly about Iran and elsewhere. That's a very important development. It's allowing Jews that have been silent or unwilling to speak out, as we had before, an opportunity to express their concern and dissent from what Israel and from what the rest of the Jewish community is doing. Sadly, this is still a small occurrence. They're not a majority, unfortunately, and the huge influence that the Israel lobby here has on our government, on the Prime Minister and on the government, is still very significant. We're running a hysterical panic campaign about anti-Semitism, which is really kind of based on not much at all. And this is an indication of the hysteria that's distracting attention from Gaza and from everything else. There was just a hearing I testified in State Parliament a couple of days ago. I mean, this, as you know well, the literature has been, the newspapers have been full of this panic about anti-Semitism. And as you mentioned, I've been at every rally for over a year, the Palestinian rally. There is not one piece of evidence of anti-Semitism at any of the rallies or in the Palestine activist movement. So it's all bullshit.
Well, as much as it might offend some of the hardline Zionists, many of the Arabs, especially those from Lebanon, Palestine, historic Palestine, or as they call it, Israel now, we're all Semites. We were all.
Well, that doesn't help. That doesn't help. Yeah, I know. But, you know, that's a sort of a technical subtlety. The Jews don't see that that's a commonality, as you know. I mean, they have these deep racist attitudes, especially in Israel, towards the Arabs, their brothers. But the fact that we're all the
We're all
same
human beings. But
doesn't help.
just on that point, especially the European Jews, they don't accept that the actual Semites are Semites.
Look, it's all rubbish. Depending on the history that you read, it turns out people like me that come from European Jews, we probably never came out of the Middle East anyway. We were
Yeah,
some sort of converts in Russia or somewhere. It's all bullshit. And
yeah.
it really doesn't matter. It doesn't help solve the problem today. People hate one another for all sorts of stupid reasons. And
Well, usually this hate, in my limited life experience, it's spurred on by some political aspirant who
exactly,
who
exactly,
divides people for their own power gains.
exactly.
And we see that on a small level in small organizations. We see it on a large level. We see it at an international level. It's very unfortunate. It's led to tremendous loss of life and tremendous misery throughout the world. Now, is America, this is a question, I know neither of us have a line into the American administration, but and you mentioned that Trump is unpredictable. I think perhaps the most predictable thing about Trump is how much money he can make out of everything. But considering the current situation, do you think that America, because America is not Trump, Trump is just the president. They're still all the planners and strategists, etc. Do you think that that they will join Israel overtly? I mean, they covertly with Israel. They continue to supply weapons, etc. But will they overtly join Israel in the war against Iran? Do you think?
It's very hard to say. I don't know what the very latest thing is in the last day or so, but it's a calculation they'll have to make. Look, I can't predict. I mean, maybe Trump will realize that that's more trouble than it's worth. He has exercised. I think I read somewhere that Netanyahu was going to assassinate the Iranian leader, and they warned off that. So maybe they're exercising some kind of restraint. It's very hard to know how they calculate. But look, maybe unlike the earlier administrations, I think, as you say rightly, what do they use the word transactional? I think Trump calculates things on a kind of a profit loss basis. And I think he may realize that Israel is more of a loss than a profit, and may, to that extent, restrain what Israel does, figuring it's not helping the United States. That may be a likely deal breaker.
Well, a war is going to increase the cost of everything for everybody in the West. It'll make it'll destabilize economies. It will turn life inside out for a lot of people. I mean, if the Ukraine war wasn't enough to make life difficult for us, this one is likely to be on a far bigger scale, far worse, for far more damaging to all the economies all around the world. And look, Khamenei, the supreme leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran, he's been targeted for assassinations many times before, and this wouldn't be the first time. And it just seems that leaders in countries that have not acquiesced or sold out to the US interests, they have to have a lot of security, and even the supreme Chinese leader, he has to have tremendous security. Arguably, the second most powerful country on earth, perhaps becoming the most powerful country on earth, and the leader does not feel safe, whereas the American leader feels a lot safer, apart from the theatrics before the election, which gives an impression that you have one group of nations that do not target leaders, opposing leaders, and others who will do anything to destabilize, including killing leaders, as Israel has killed the leader of Hezbollah, the leader of Hamas, the political leader, and the military leader, and they've had a long history of assassinations. So I wouldn't be surprised if we hear about some failed assassination attempts in the coming days. Perhaps some Israeli agents being arrested and prosecuted for this. I think it's all on the cards, and it may well be that there might be some US agents involved in this, but I hope it doesn't happen. Being transactional, I'm sure that Trump would understand that he can make a very lucrative deal with Iran. You have, on the one hand, one country that can actually pay, and another country that's been siphoning money from America throughout its history.
Sure.
So I don't know. I don't know.
In
Yeah.
terms of assassinations, of course, America has a sordid history of bumping off leaders all over the world for decades. Assassinations from Vietnam and in the 60s, and in South America, all over the place. Death squads that were funded. I mean, the famous case in El Salvador, I think Archbishop Romero was assassinated by a death squad that was funded by the Americans. So yes, assassinating leaders all around the world is the modus operandi for the American, the CIA. So that's what we're up against. It's rogue regimes and creating havoc for the world.
Look, do you think there's any chance that there might be a change towards a moderate government in Israel, or that's just a lost cause completely?
I think that's not worth worrying about.
It's not going to happen.
I can't see that that's going to happen, given the public, as I mentioned, the enormous support of the general public for the crimes, the atrocities, the genocide. Many people have pointed, and you can think of comparisons. Look, the South African government wouldn't have ended apartheid if it wasn't for outside pressure. And I think the general, I think perfectly clear understanding is that unless the outside world will exert pressure, Israel won't change what it's doing. Why would it? Why should it? It's not paying any price. And it's, as we said, it's impunity for all it's doing. And lots of other examples. Indonesia wouldn't have ended its atrocities in East Timor until America decided to end it. We were a bit slow. John Howard didn't quite catch on and was still supporting the Indonesian atrocities in East Timor, as I understand it, until America decided it's time to end it. Now, it ended very badly, but it ended. And I think that's why, sadly, America is often on the wrong side of this. But That's why I think, to get back to what people can do, um, in these cases, the Vietnam War is another example. It ended finally when the public were rising up, and the dissent at home became so strong that the American government decided to cut its losses. Now, that takes a long time, and it's very costly. I mean, in Vietnam, there were 3 or 4 million people were killed. Um, but that's our job, I guess. What else can we do? We've got to exert pressure. And our government, I'm sorry to say, has been disgraceful in its turning a blind eye and making lame excuses or not saying anything. And the claim that we're too far away or that we're a small player, it's just bullshit. I mean, the fact is, we could say a lot. We could withdraw our ambassador. We could send away the Israeli ambassador. We could cut all of our military ties. There's a whole list of things. In fact, I received today from the Jewish Council of Australia. They've got a wonderful long list of all the right things that we could do if we had the decency to do it. So that's the least we can do.
I might need to follow up with them on.
I was going to suggest that they're a very important group, and because they're Jewish, the more prominence and the more allies that they have, especially in the Muslim community, that would strengthen them and strengthen the support from the Muslim side as well.
Well, maybe after the podcast, I can get some contacts, and then we can send them the draft statement, see if they're willing to. I might make that into a petition and advertise it to get some support. But
well, the alternative is you can look at their statement, which just came out today that I'm referring to, and you might find that that's the other way to go. Support their
that's fine.
statement.
I'll have a look.
I'll send that to you.
Yeah. Um, uh, just on the point of public dissent, there's been weekly protests for 20 months. I think it only stopped for a short time when there was a ceasefire that did not last. And the protests are not growing; they're getting smaller, and it seems that the government is not really feeling the pressure now. Uh, uh, in my humble opinion, the last election was handed over to Labor because people didn't want the extremism of Peter Dutton and especially his Israel policy that he would go against the International Court of Justice and welcome the war criminal Netanyahu and give Israel more and more support. So this is one of the things. It's not the only thing, of course, that impacted on voters, but on the main, I believe that Australians prefer moderate governance. The Australians, I'm an Australian, you're an Australian as well, despite our backgrounds. We like to be fair and balanced, and we like to be just with everybody. We like to give everybody a fair go. But that part of the lesson in the election, I don't think has sunk in. I mean, Australians did not want to risk. That's why he got such a big mandate, such a huge majority, because they did not want to risk the coalition winning government. So,
yeah, but I think that they made a mistake. The public didn't understand the preferential voting system properly. They should have voted for another party, the Greens, perhaps, for example, and given their preference, the second preference to Labor. That way, we might have had a hung parliament. We were hoping for that the government would have been not a majority party. So this thumping victory it got is, I think, unfortunate because they're not accountable anymore. They don't feel that they have to do anything.
but it gives them the power to do something if they had the will.
They haven't got the decency or the guts to do it. I'm sorry to say, what Albanese has shown, and Wong. They haven't had the decency to act when they could have and should have, and now they're comfortable. They probably don't feel the need to. You're right. They now have the mandate.
They have the mandate to do what is right. So we just need to keep putting pressure on them. It was really unfortunate that Richard Marles managed to put enough pressure to take Ed Husic out of cabinet, and Ed Husic came out and he said I've been supporting Palestine in the cabinet, and this is why they targeted me.
But he can now speak more freely. With the hope, he's now going to be more vocal. He's been good, but he has to be more vocal. To be honest, I'm a bit surprised how few, apart from Fatima Payman, why didn't they all just speak up? I mean, I'm unhappy about the fact that whatever the party solidarity or the rules are, we're talking about a genocide. And Fatima Payman simply was asking for Labor to support its own policy, which is just a lame, pathetic recognition of the Palestinian statehood. It wasn't going to save anybody in Gaza, and she had to leave the party for that. I mean, I would have liked a whole bunch of them to leave. Why didn't Ed Husic leave? Why didn't Tony Burke leave? They're supposed to be the friends of Palestine.
Yeah, I mean, some people feel that they can do more on the inside, but
We can't see any evidence of that.
this is where we have to mount more pressure. Recently, I had a meeting with it was the Eid festival, and I had a conversation with one of the senior Labour ministers, and I said to him, I said, look, there was a huge pressure on Muslim leaders. You actually Labour's support for Israel has divided the Muslim community, and the Muslim Vote Matter group came up to make you guys accountable. Still, a lot of Muslim leaders stood by you because they didn't want to risk a dut and win.
That's right.
You guys have to come out and deliver. You have
Right.
to.
But they don't have to now. The sad thing is that now they got such a big victory. I don't believe that they feel any. I mean, if now, look, let me try and put this a bit bluntly. The the genocide is such a horror. The question is, how bad does it get before they speak up and say what we are saying? They're worried about their career. What are they worried about? I can't understand it because it's such a moral crisis. The Palestinians I know are grieving and traumatized by what they're seeing happening to their families. Any of us watching it online, I mean, you're in tears watching this stuff. I'm a bit shocked at how inactive Labor has been and how silent they have been, even though some of them I'm figuring must be squirming. I mean, it's not good enough. Look, my background, my parents survived the Nazi Holocaust. I mean, my mother always used to say, I repeat this often in public. She asked, why did the world turn away? Why didn't anybody do anything? Well, we know the answer now. Our politicians are not doing anything, or not enough.
Just one point you made, which I find really interesting, and I think it's on the minds of a lot of people, that when it comes to taking a moral stand, they say we're too far, we're too inconsequential. But when it comes to supporting Israel, no, they're not far anymore. They
Exactly right. Exactly right. Exactly right. It's not a question of distance. There's lots of good examples. I like telling the story when I speak sometimes publicly about the story of Dunn's stores in Dublin, where during the apartheid period in South Africa, some checkout girl, she decided not to sell a grapefruit, which was Israeli. I'm sorry, which was South African.
yeah.
She didn't want to sell the South African grapefruit. The whole of the store and the whole of Ireland workers all went out, and finally they changed it to a boycott policy. So one small act of resistance and decency can lead to big changes. So the fact that we're far away is not an excuse.
No, of course it's not an excuse. And I mean, we were leading the charge against apartheid South Africa, but we seem to be impotent
Yeah,
when confronting Israel.
exactly.
Israel has gone out has started a war against Iran for being a critic of their genocide. Will they start a war against South Africa for taking them to the international court?
Well, they've made it in the past when one of the South African judges, I forgot his name now, he made a big report. They made his life uncomfortable and he withdrew from that first. There was one very big report on Gaza and the crimes that Israel was committing there. I forgot his name for a minute. But they don't hesitate. And I think they've been pursuing the guy who's the head of the ICC now. I'm blocking on all these names. They don't hesitate to blackmail
The
and
prosecutor, you mean the Khan? I forgot his
uh,
first name as well.
is it Karim Khan? What's his name? Yeah,
Yeah, something Khan. I
yeah.
forgot his
So
first
he
name.
was reluctant and slow, and now
Yeah.
they've raised some sexual
Yeah, they
misconduct.
tried to scandalize him, and
That's right.
that's the other concern. Are they holding are they keeping hush on some scandal with respect to our politicians? I mean, like when Musk fell out with Trump, he accused him of being on the Epstein list. Do we have some of our political leaders on a similar
They
list?
don't have to. It's worse than that, Keysar. It's worse than that. They do it out of their own judgment. They don't have dirt on our politicians for them to be, bending the knee and going along with America and afraid to say anything different. Why are we signing up to America's foreign policy?
Well, indeed, and one thing that Israel has been succeeding at is playing the religion card, not just the Jewish religion card, but the fear of Islam and Muslims. Historically, you could always find the nexus between Islamophobic incidents and Israel's attack on Palestinians or attacks on Lebanon. Now, in this particular case, I think people are seeing, I think that people around the world are seeing that this is not Islam versus Judaism or Islam versus Christianity, that this is Israel trying to kill an indigenous population that has that is of many faiths. There are Palestinian Jews, there are Palestinian Christians, and there are Palestinian Muslims. The majority of Palestinians are Muslims who had converted from other faiths into Islam a long time ago. Their ancestors converted, and they're indigenous to that land. And I think the more and more people are realizing that. But with protests not producing the results that we want, what can we do to win the hearts and minds of more and more people? Because clearly, the more people who would take a stand, the more chance we have of our governments doing the right thing and maybe finding ways to put a stop to this violence.
Yeah, look, it's the right question to ask. As you say, and I've been going to the rallies now for over a year, and it's all very well. We all make each other feel better, and it's important as a matter of solidarity. But I can't think that we've had any significant impact. Look, I'm sure there are other things we can do, but there's so many of us that are engaged doing whatever we can do, writing letters, having meetings around the place. I'm constantly going to meetings and talking to groups. I was in Canberra and Wagga last week. I'm going to Perth tomorrow for a panel discussion on Palestine. And so these community meetings are very important. I think one thing I can say in general, we have to resist the attempts to shut us up. I'm very engaged in the debate at the State Parliament just yesterday, the inquiry about anti-Semitism. This is an attempt to shut us up by suggesting that the only reason you might criticize Israel is if you hate Jews. That's just terrible scandal, and people are intimidated by that. They're silenced by it. It's a very effective strategy, and I want to say that people ought not to be permitting themselves to be silenced because it's obviously not true, and that's having a big impact. Now, there's the universities have all adopted a version of this IHRA definition. The government, Albanese, has adopted it. Governments around the world. I think that's one important. We need to give people courage. If the general public felt able to come out and lose this fear of being accused of being anti-Semitic, I know that a lot of decent people worry they wouldn't say some of the things I can say. My friends in the movement, the Palestinians especially, the wonderful, admirable Randa Abdel Fattah, for example, one of the heroes in the movement, they will be careful, justly, for speaking in ways that I don't have to be careful. And I'm saying that, I can give you an example. I was at the University of Technology, Sydney, and I gave a speech, and I said in my voice, really, Jews should be uncomfortable. Now, because one guy there was holding an Israeli flag, and I called him out. What a shocking thing to do. And I spoke to a rabbi the other day. He said, to his credit, he said, no, Jews should not be uncomfortable. They should be ashamed. Well, now, there are ways to make that point clearly so that it's not anti-Semitic, to call out, if Israel is behaving on behalf of all Jews, the organizations here, the peak Jewish organizations, the Jewish Board of Deputies, Australia-Israel Jewish Affairs Committee, all the Jewish organizations, this awful right-wing group, the Australian Jewish Association, they're absolutely cheerleading the atrocities and the genocide. Well, criticizing them isn't anti-Semitic, and it's a simple point. I think I tried to say this in Parliament the other day. Anti-Semitism is when you criticize Jews for being Jews for no other reason.
That's
but
right.
If you're criticizing them for what they're doing, what they're responsible for, if they were Buddhists, you'd be just as critical of them. It doesn't matter. It's not
If they're
because
Buddhists, Muslims, Christians, if they're doing that, they have to
they're
be
crimes and they're supporting crimes. And I have some good quotes I'm constantly repeating. For example, Desmond Tutu said, in a time of injustice, to be silent is to side with the perpetrator. So in other words, being silent is not an option. When Israel is claiming to be acting on behalf of all Jews, it's not an option for Jews to not say anything anymore. And I always quote a rabbi, Joshua Heschel, famous, he marched with Martin Luther King for civil rights. He said, some are guilty, but all are responsible. We all have a responsibility to speak out. And there are lots of examples of let me give you another slogan. The Jews actually say publicly around the world, what Israel is doing, that we say, not in our name. But that's a polite way of saying to other Jews, is it in your name? If it's in your name, you should say something. So in other words, it's what I'm saying. You can't just be silent. And the other slogan is silence is complicity. Well, we need to be much more,
Absolutely, yes.
we need to be, I think, unafraid to point the finger and demand that people dissociate themselves from this horror. I mean, how bad does it get?
And condemn it in the strongest terms.
How bad does it get before you decide that you have to speak out?
They have to stop sending money to Israel. They have to also be. I think we should prosecute any Australian who goes to fight with the Israeli
Well,
military.
that's probably, there are lawyers that understand that that's actually a criminal offence. By the way, one other thing I should say, there's a noticeable shift. Things are so bad that now some Jews, too late, but they're starting to get cold feet. So, for example, in America, basically he's a Zionist. Thomas Friedman, who's the New York Times, he wrote an article very strong saying Jews should dissociate themselves. Now, that's pretty much new, where it's saying what I'm saying. He's now calling out Jews, not just Zionists.
Yes.
And that's important, so the Jews have to start feeling it's late, but it's not too late to speak up and protest what's being done in their name.
So just one last question. I'm really grateful that we can have so much of your time, especially when you're going to be traveling away for the next few days. What advice can we give to the Australian government? I know you've made some fair criticism. We've all been very critical. And the fear that they have, in my opinion, they should just put it aside and just do what is morally right. But if we can quantify that advice and perhaps break it down into various aspects, what advice would you, as a seasoned, experienced academic, give to the Australian government?
Oh, dear goodness me. It's a good question, Keysar. Look, I, for many years, as I think I mentioned, went to Canberra with APAN, lobbying the politicians. I think there's a general consensus, even Nasser Mashni, the wonderful president of APAN. I'm not sure we got any good results after all this. Look at what's happened. After all the lobbying, we met with all of the top people. And what did it do? There were a couple of super decent people there. They're not in Parliament anymore. So what can we do? One thing that occurs to me, by the way, is that, that Albanese and Wong and perhaps Peter Dutton and others, they've been referred to the International Criminal Court for their complicity. They're actually liable criminally. So, I mean, that's not nothing. They're actually under the Genocide Convention. My understanding is that they are actually accessories to the genocide. So, I mean, the media ought to be stronger. I'm sorry to say the media are terrible in Australia. I read better interviews on CNN and on other channels overseas, where long interviews with Syed Morandi and various, Jeffrey Sachs, various other dissenting voices, Mehdi Hassan. There are very many very strong voices that are saying what I'm trying to say. They don't appear on our media. So what can we do? All of these things. There's no one thing. But if you're asking how do you get these politicians to behave decently, I really don't know the answer to that. What does it take? By the way, Anthony Albanese, I quoted him outside his office when there was a demonstration outside his office. I quoted what he said before he was Prime Minister.
Yes,
He said what you and I would both say.
Yeah.
But where's his decency? Where's his spine? That's the problem we're facing. And Penny Wong makes all sorts of excuses and is critical of David Shoebridge, who's the most wonderful, decent human being. So she tries to say all these terrible things to the Greens. They're the only ones, by the way, in Parliament, pretty much the only ones, that have the decency to say what has to be said. David Shoebridge has been pushing how we're up to our necks in still sending parts of arms or whatever it is we're selling. We're behaving badly. And I don't think we should be pussyfooting around, avoiding saying the truth. It's so bad. I mean, it's beyond desperate now. I mean, you and I are probably seeing the horrors on our phones, and it's just, you're seeing doctors crying, and the public don't see it enough, maybe. I think that's another big job. The horror has to be much more visible to more people, so they're all shocked. and they decide that it's very late. I mean, people are talking about even, I don't know how this could possibly happen, but some kind of flotilla, a military, naval intervention, not just one little boat going in, which is not going to do any good. I mean, you know, in Berlin, there was an airlift and the coalition of the willing. I mean, how do we get some serious attempt to stop what Israel is doing? I'm not sure military is the answer, but how long can Israel keep doing what it's doing in Gaza?
Well, the military, the first military answer is to stop arming Israel and
That's right.
stop arming them. And if there is an aid convoy or flotilla, that they should have adequate protection. So if they're attacked, they
Exactly.
can be defended.
That's right.
The I mean, it's just makes you just wonder about the value of human life to some of these people, that they feel that they're entitled and everybody else has to either be their slave or dead. But we keep the fight, and I'll follow up that statement that you mentioned before, and if you get time, any feedback, written feedback on my on the draft petitions slash
Yeah.
statement that I did, that would be great. Um, I must admit that I drafted it quickly and just to get something out there, because you know, a moment wasted might be a moment too long.
That's right.
Every second of bombing leads to destruction and loss of life, and we want to
Exactly
save
right.
life.
Exactly, I agree. I'll send you the statement that the Jewish Council of Australia just made, which I think you'll find. I haven't read yours, but if you read that, I think you'll find that very strong. It lists all of the things that I think we should be doing.
Yeah. Okay, great. So, I mean, we could probably do in conjunction, like having more than one statement doesn't hurt. And if this is I've got people who are willing to pay money into a petition that. So if they pay money to promote the petition, then it'll get to more and more people. We might even be able to get people to fund a full page in the
Exactly.
newspaper. So
I
we're
think
working on that.
if I could repeat though, I think if you were seen to join forces with them, that would be
Oh,
a great
definitely,
strength.
definitely. I'm 100% join forces with them and anybody else
Good look.
to
It's a
come
good
on
look
board.
if the Jewish group and the Muslim group were seen to stand in solidarity with each other.
Yeah, that's I'm all for it. All right, thank you very much again, Peter, and I look forward to future conversations. And just for the benefit of everybody who's watching this, we are working on an in-person conference or seminar next Friday. At the moment, we've booked the hall. It's partially sponsored by the Lebanese Muslim Association, who are kind enough to give us their hall at no charge, and I will be giving more information on that as we finalize the speaker. And thank you for agreeing to come and be part of that next Friday, the 27th, I think it is. But more information will come out on that shortly, inshallah. Thanks, Peter. Thank you.
Thanks, Keysar. It's a great pleasure, a privilege.
We'll talk again later.
Thank you.
See you later. Bye.